I'm live. Outstanding. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, albeit a bit delayed. Apologies for that. There were some technical difficulties that hopefully we have resolved. All right, that sounds better. Relative to making sure folks at home could see the feasibility study and all of the photos, et cetera, following along at home. In addition, it's my understanding, in case we lose the connectivity that we have, or other folks, not me, have labored so hard through the last 25 minutes or so to secure, it will be all of the stuff that we're talking about this evening relative to schematics, pictures, et cetera, will be uploaded to the website tomorrow. So you have that opportunity as well. This is the 21st? December 21st Select Board meeting. It's been a long month. And if everyone could please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Before we go through the action items, it is the time in the process where we have public comment. Do we have any public comment first in the audience? Seeing none, is there any public comment from at home? All right, I have two announcements to make. The first is regarding the December 7th executive session relative to Section 2D of the employment agreement between Norfolk, the Board of Selectmen, now called the Select Board, and Blythe Robinson. The Select Board has decided not to renew the agreement beyond the expiration date, which date is June 30th, 2022. Written notice of the board's decision was sent pursuant to the agreement via first-class mail, as well as through email on December 8th and then on the 9th. There will be no discussion either by or from the board or anyone else tonight. It's not on the agenda, so it would be violative of the public of the rules. And moreover, because the initial meeting was in executive session, there will be no discussion. Blythe will continue in her role for the duration of her contract, which is through June 30th, 2022, and we thank her for that. And regarding methodology for selecting a new town administrator and any other housekeeping matters, those will be dealt with discussions in the new year in January after they've been appropriately posted. We thank Blythe so very much for her service to the town of Norfolk. With respect to my second announcement, while ordinarily I'm the person who shuts down comments and questions, that's my thing, I think that the fire station is an important enough topic that to the extent that people are watching who do have questions, I would, so long as they don't stray too far afield or are polite, I plan to open it up for any questions that there may be. Once the study has been presented, once the select board has finished with their questions, there'll be time for folks. I feel like the audience is pretty much packed with folks who already know, so perhaps at home who may have questions. And I am sure that there are going to be countless other opportunities to vet and ask questions as well. So to the extent that people are gnashing their teeth that they aren't able, they didn't know, so they didn't sign on, there'll be plenty of other opportunities as well. But it just feels like everybody's here. We'll take advantage of that. So without further ado, Blythe, do you mind taking us through the action items for this evening?
So as you've just discussed, the Fire Station Building Committee is here to present the feasibility study for the station and ask for the approval from the board to commence schematic design. Joining us tonight is the building committee and our consultants, our OPM, our Vertex, our OPM, and Doran Whittier, our architects. Following that, we have the board to consider approval of a Class 2 auto license for Carvana LLC, which expires at the end of the year. To consider authorizing the town administrator to execute documents regarding 2 settlements regarding opioid litigation. To consider amending the 2022 annual renewal fees for alcohol beverage license holders and taxi cab licenses. I have some updates. There are 4 warrants to be signed and 1 set of minutes for approval.
Thank you. So I guess that brings us to the presentation by the Fire Station Building Committee and the feasibility study.
Sure. Thank you, Select Board, for having us tonight. As you know, the Fire Station Building Committee was formed less than a year ago. I need to mute this computer. Is that better? Okay. Formed less than a year ago, and one of our major tasks was completing a feasibility study to determine the best approach to renovating or replacing the fire station. I'm excited on behalf of the Fire Station Building Committee tonight to tell you that we have that feasibility study to present, and hopefully get approval by the Select Board to move into the next phase, schematic design, to progress what we feel is a pretty strong approach to replacing the fire station. Tonight's presentation is the result of a lot of hard work, primarily by our design team, Doran Whittier, and our OPM, Vertex, as well as the Fire Station Building Committee. The expertise of Doran Whittier and Vertex has allowed us to get to this point in a pretty efficient and organized way. I think it's been a pretty quick process, but also a very focused process and very exploratory process. And we're also fortunate to have a committee whose expertise, which includes a firefighter, several engineers, an architect, as well as the town administrator and fire chief, has provided some good insight and thoughtfulness to the process. As you're aware, the community has already invested quite a bit in this project, including acquiring the additional property next to the fire station, as well as blasting rock to hopefully make the future construction easier. The project has been stopped and started numerous times over a considerable number of years, and frankly, the time has come to do something. As you'll see in the presentation tonight, it's apparent to anyone who's toured the fire station, the conditions that the fire department staff are working and living in are deplorable. They're making do in a facility that was not designed for them. It was designed for police use, and an apparatus bay that was constructed over 50 years ago and is totally insufficient for today's firefighting work. Construction costs continue to rise every year, and it's frankly time to take action. So I'll turn it over to Doran Whittier shortly for the formal presentation, but what they'll be presenting, we as the committee feel is the best approach for the project. A spoiler alert, while we explored renovation and addition of the existing facility, we are ultimately recommending moving forward with a new facility, as we feel it's more cost-effective, will result in a longer-lasting, better-end product that allows our fire department staff and better serve the community and work in a significantly better environment. With all that said, I'll turn it over to Ron for the formal presentation.
Thank you. If you can all hear me okay. As Kevin noted, there's a lot of people to thank. Obviously, the building committee, but the planning board has been involved. The Board of Health has reviewed items with us, the water department, the community members. We had a meeting on November 3rd. The entire fire department has chimed in, as well as the Walpole Fire Department, the Sharon Fire Department, the Medfield Fire Department, and the Franklin Fire Department. In addition, we've been in contact with Mass Saves and Eversource to get into their incentive program, which will result in some funding for this for the town. So again, on behalf of the team, we'd like to thank all those people involved. It's been a great process. So this is the existing site. Main Street is up at the top of the page, and that's north. To the right is the east, and you'll see that there's a residential property. To the south, there's a hill, a wooded hill, and then again a residential property. And to the left, you can see the church parking lot. In meeting with the planning board, we have talked about the zoning and the setbacks. So the setback on the right-hand side of the site, which faces the residential property, there is parking, existing parking right now. That existing parking is within the new zoning ordinances, which has changed, obviously, since 2015, the last time this was looked at. And the request that we made was, can we leave the parking there? Can we reuse that parking, or do we have to demolish that parking and make that a green space as required by the new zoning and move it? And the planning board, is looking forward to us coming back to them when we have a complete plan. On the left-hand side is where the church is, and it's the same condition. The church right now is in an R2 residential zone, and so the planning board is willing to talk with us and the town about either changing the zoning for the church, which would actually make it less non-compliant than it is now in the residential zone, or coming up with some kind of special permit. So the planning board has taken a look at this and given us some good insight and some good information to come back with that to them in the future, and we have a meeting scheduled with them in January. I'm trying to get this here. So one of the things that Kevin mentioned was the lack of space. So I think as many community members know, and as you all know, the fire department is housed in a temporary trailer, which has been there for approximately 10 years, and we learned that that actually replaced another temporary trailer that was in place for 10 years. And so what this means is there's actually no space in the fire department. So at night, whether it's raining or icing or snow on the ground, if there's an emergency at night, the firefighters actually have to run out of this trailer across the parking lot to get to the apparatus bay. So that means when they get into the station itself, if they're soaking wet from the rain and they put their gear on, when they get to a fire, it's actually dangerous because there's steam involved with that. So you can see also in the lower right-hand corner that the trucks just barely fit into the bays. And you can see from a height requirement, they barely fit. But the reality is, this is how they park in the fire apparatus bay. This is how close the trucks are. So you can imagine if I'm a firefighter and I'm trying to get from one line of trucks to the other, I have to go all the way around, which obviously between the quarters out back in the trailers and then this kind of condition inside the bays, it all reflects the response time that's taking place. And the chief has invited any community members down at any time to take a look at this in the situation that they're in. So in addition to the space requirements, there were studies done in 2009 and studies done again in 2015, and the physical building itself is starting to deteriorate in a pretty meaningful way. What you see there in the upper right-hand corner are what's called Masonry Lentils. Those are corroded to the point where they're starting to rotate forward. You can see in the lower left-hand corner, that's the interior load-bearing concrete block walls that now have structural cracks in them. And in the upper left-hand corner, there's a brick veneer on the 1986 version that is also appearing with stress cracks. And the upper left-hand corner, the most of the upper left-hand corner, you can see the foundation is also cracked. The chimney itself has gone through repairs and repairs over the years, but again, the mortar is simply failing. So the building itself is in a critical nature. Just to talk a little bit about the demographics, the fire station was built in 1966, and since 1966, the town, according to these projections, you have 12,003 residents in the town today, and in 1970 you had 4,600. So the town has grown significantly, and in addition to the town growing in terms of the number of residents, in 2000, MAPC estimated you had approximately 2,818 houses, and depending on whether you're looking at a single-family residence or you're looking at housing units, you're going to be up over 4,000 in 2030. So remember that the station was built back in 1966, so we didn't look back to 1966 how many houses you had. But this is the projection based on housing demands. So the next thing we did is, as Kevin said, there's been a lot of work done over the years. So in 2001, Allen Lieb Architects did a study for the town, and they came up with a spatial program that essentially said you needed a station of 23,686 square feet. In 2015, JHA also did a programming summary. And that programming effort established a building of 21,990 square feet. So as one can imagine, the codes and the safety and the NFPA regulations have all changed over the years. So what has changed since 2015 is the Mass Building Code has been updated, and in fact, the next version, version 10, is due to come out in 2022. Every time those codes change, it changes the type of construction and what you need to do in terms of code. NFPA has come out with new health and safety codes. Firefighters are subjected to all sorts of chemicals and contaminants when they go out on these calls. And the NFPA now is requiring these stations to be both focused on health and wellness of the staff and the firefighters. Obviously, the existing station doesn't meet any of those codes. The town in 2017 adopted the Massachusetts Stretch Code, which is fantastic because that will save you money in the long term. But what that means is we have to put in some energy efficiencies into this building that are 10% better than the Mass Code for energy. The other thing that we looked at is bringing all the vehicles into one station. Today, if there's a call for a certain vehicle, there are vehicles housed in a locked garage over at the former town hall site. So you can imagine the fire department has to get in the trucks, drive over there, unlock the garage, get the apparatus out to respond to a call. And as the community has grown, the call numbers have gone way up. And I'm sure the chief can talk a little bit about the call numbers in a few minutes. So that's what's changed. And taking all of that into account, we went through a very detailed and thorough programming exercise, which included visiting those 4 fire stations and talking to those 4 chiefs that we mentioned in the surrounding towns. Took into consideration all of the code updates and all of the new codes, and we came to a facility of 30,939 square feet. Now, having said that, we then put on our design hats as a group, and the fire department and the chief, and the lessons that we learned from everyone else, we were able to reduce the space. We're sharing spaces, as this list shows you. We're using spaces for multi-purpose uses. We are opening up space so they can work one way during the day, another way at night. We decided to organize the building in a certain way. For instance, you'll see that all the administration is on an upper floor and all of the community space is on a lower floor. And what that does is it gets rid of some superfluous spaces that you typically see in a fire station. We've combined tool rooms, repair shops, and storage areas. We reduced the lobby area. We removed one of the fire poles by having the stairs right up against the apparatus bays. And we removed the need for a locker room, which takes up a lot of space in a fire station. Now, the standard, as you've seen in the 2001 to 2015 studies, have a standard of 30% net to gross. And our net to gross as it stands today is 22%. And all of that is to say that we've reduced the program by design, if you will, to 25,690 square feet. So I would sort of venture out to say that the program has been thoroughly vetted, and the design is actually taken into consideration trying to reduce the size of the building. So what that means for the community is the staff is in a fire station that's going to allow them quicker response times and safer response times. They'll be in a code compliance station, so any kind of accidents on the job, any kind of decontaminations or things like that will be dealt with so that the staff is taken care of. The access to the station, obviously, if we bring the vehicles back from the former site, is going to be quicker response. And Norfolk's going to have an NFPA compliant space that allows them to work better, quite frankly. And then the training room is also meant to also be community meeting space. So we came up with one option, which was addition and renovation. And then we came up with 3 different new construction options. And the new construction option you're going to see tonight was the least square footage, so the smaller of the 3 options, and the most cost-effective of the 3 options. So the addition renovation option talked about doing perform selective demolition, construct a new addition, once the new addition is done, move into there, knock down, or I should say renovate the interior of the old addition. And what that means is that phasing extends the duration of the project, and it's more invasive, if you will. Whereas the new construction is, the phase one is we're gonna build a new building, and then they move from the old building to the new building, and we simply knock down the old building and complete the site work. So those were the options that we worked on. We also wanted to take a look at what does this mean in terms of what could the fire station look like? And these are all very conceptual diagrams that you're looking at tonight, which is why it's important to go into the schematic design phase so we can start to vet this further. Not only vet the design, but vet the numbers you're about to see. So this is just one option of what that addition and renovation project could look like that we met with the building committee to consider. This is yet another option of what it might look like. And then we also took a look at the new construction option as to what that might look like. Keep in mind that the reason you see all these pitched roofs is your recent ordinance actually requires pitched roofs to be on the building now. So it obviously adds a little bit of cost to the project. But the idea, I think the intent, or we think the intent of the zoning is to keep it in character with the town. This is another option of what the new construction could look like. And so working with the building committee and the fire department, we vetted all of those options and we priced them up. So many people ask, why does everybody always build a new fire station? So through this process, we found out that it actually costs more money to do an addition or renovation due to the logistics, the phasing, and the duration of the construction schedule than to build new. And so what we have here is the addition and renovation project. And the total project cost, and the reason it says draft is because our goal here is that when we go into schematic design, we're going to be refining these numbers. We're going to be refining the design. And so right now you're looking at a total project cost for addition and renovation of $26,744,338. Now, we also, consider the fact that we have approximately 3.3 million already in hand. So that was the number that our estimators and our engineers and the design team came up with. You'll also notice that in this, you see soft costs, you see hard costs, and you see contingencies. So you see the number of those contingencies, right? Those are pretty high numbers. The reason for that is we're very, very early in the process. We're going to refine the design and the numbers as we go forward in the process. And all of those contingencies are your money. So we want to make sure that as we go into this, we're protecting the budget so that by the end of the day, maybe you have some monies left over, but what we don't have to do is go back to the town for any additional. When we took a look at the new construction option, you'll notice here that the new construction option in terms of hard cost, and that's basically brick and mortar, if you will. That's a little bit more, obviously, because you've got some things in the existing station that would remain in terms of hard costs. But when we get into soft costs and total project numbers, the soft costs go down because it's new construction and it's a shorter project duration. The hard costs, in terms of contingencies and so forth, go down because those contingencies are now based on new construction and are not based on addition and renovation. So the project cost is $25,115,119, and again, we do have the 3.3 million in hand. So those were the numbers. And we wanted to do a little comparison. So these are the 4 stations that we visited during the process, not only to learn from those chiefs what they would do differently and how they can combine and use space more effectively. If Medfield was built today, it would be $34.4 million. If Franklin was built today, it'd be $15.5 million. But keep in mind that this is one of 2 stations that they have, where in Norfolk you only have the 1 station. The Sharon Fire Station, again, there are 2 stations involved, and if you built that today, it'd be $51.7 million. That's police and fire, but then there's a substation for the police. And if you go to the Sharon Fire Station, you'll also notice there's a pre-engineered garage next door that also houses some vehicles. And then the Walpole Fire Station, which is one of 3 stations right now, and this just completed, I believe, in 2016 or 17. 17. They're in the process now of redoing one of their stations, or 2 of their stations, because they're out of space. So one of the lessons we learned from Walpole is make sure you build it all in so it doesn't cost you more in the future. But if you were to build that station today, it'd be $20.1 million. Now, the other thing we did is you're a green community, and one of the most important concepts was how do we drive down the energy use of this building, because it's not only the investment you're putting into the building today, but it's the investment total cost of ownership is what we call it. So what are you going to be paying in the future? So these numbers we talked about tonight, we've got a good building orientation. We're focusing on the envelope, which is how the building is insulated, which saves you energy. We talked about, we're looking at with Matt, facilities director, we've looked at the systems we're going to put into the building to get you down to the lowest energy use intensity that we can get to. And for that reason, Mass Saves and Eversource have invited you into their Pathway 1 incentive program, which can pay you back up to $2.25 a square foot for achieving their targets. Because we've also got them involved already. So I think there's another thing coming now. So why new? The reasons were it's a smaller fire station, and it's going to be less costly to operate in the future. It's more energy effective. It's more, I should say, a more effective use of space and better response time. It's less costly to build, less time to build, better spatial efficiencies, and it's a smaller footprint, which means we have more green space because, again, the new zoning ordinance require 20% of the site to be green. And then there's less unknowns. When you go into an addition renovation project, you always run into a lot of unknowns. So this affords the town better cost control. So the schedule is such that what we'd like to do is start schematic design in January, complete bid documents by November, bid the project in December, and so that if there were a town meeting scheduled and a vote scheduled in January of 2023, you could have actual bids in hand. So this wouldn't be a situation where you're voting on something and then bidding it to find out the real cost. We could have for you bids in hand, and that's what the vote would be based on. We would start construction in March, and we'd be completed by October 2024. I know that's a lot of information. I tried to run through it as fast as I could without being too fast. So I'm sure you have lots of questions.
So a couple things I'll just reiterate is one, the building square footage, that was something that there was a lot of hand-wringing over to try and get that down. You know, the initial first pass was north of 30,000 square feet. But again, through Doran Whittier's expertise and the hard work of the fire department and fire chief, we were able to get that down to around 25,000 square feet, which, as Ron showed, is pretty close to what the 2 previous studies showed. And then you have to take into account some of the code changes that just require more square footage to a building, elevator, machine rooms, things like that. So we're pretty confident that the square footage that's shown here is really what's needed. The cost per square foot is something we have less control over, unfortunately, and rises every year. But I think this is the 3rd study that has shown it's, you know, in the 23 to 25,000 square foot range is what's necessary. And the other is really, I'll just reiterate that it's really, in our opinion, time to take some action here. That the existing fire station, it's supposed to be an essential facility. It's operational after natural disasters, and it's frankly falling apart. And it's really time to do something. Thank you.
Just to expand a little bit, just for some clarification as well, you saw some slides about some neighboring fire departments. For example, with Franklin, they have 2 facilities that are approximately 20,000 square feet. So it's, obviously a much larger community, but it's also a much larger footprint in what they have to maintain and what they use to provide their services. Similarly with Walpole, larger community, but in speaking with their chief, they're actually proposing a fourth station because within a few short years, they outgrew their facility that they invested $16 or $17 million in. We did not want to be in a position, I certainly being, still fairly young and hoping that I'm the chief here for a long time, I don't want to have to come back to you or the citizens and ask for more space because we didn't go about this process responsibly and make a really tight program, but also have a program that would allow us to grow as the town grows without having to come back and ask for millions upon millions of dollars to expand an operation. And it is, from my experience in the fire service over the past, 25 years, we're in a kind of a dire situation from the standpoint of our facility. I think it's a credit to the firefighters, to the men and women that serve this town, the way they've adapted and overcome for many years. When you really look at it, even the addition in 1985 was 90% police. The only thing the fire department gained out of that addition was one administrative office. The base space wasn't expanding. There was no living quarters added. And at that time, the fire department ran about 400 or 500 calls a year. Currently, we're running close to 2,500. We also have 4 full-time staff, when then it was just the fire chief and an administrative assistant. And I don't think the administrative assistant at that time was full-time. So there's been a lot of growth. The level of service has drastically expanded. We're an ALS-capable department now. We're providing exemplary services and services that are comparable to or better than all of the surrounding communities, which is important. And the men and women of this fire department take great pride in serving you, as the majority of them are citizens of the town as well. They take great pride in protecting their friends, their families, and also the citizens. And even those that don't live here take great pride in that. And again, they've adapted and overcome for many years. And it is time for the town and for the community to recognize that, and time to kind of step up to the plate and fix what is a dire situation.
Is there anyone else before we, nobody else planned for a for any planned presentations other than you guys? All right, well, I'll start, and then I'm sure everybody has some questions. I'll lead off with a comment, but I'm sure we'll mull, muse, et cetera, once the questions are asked. But I'm not aware of any people who don't recognize that the current fire station situation is untenable and needs to get changed. I appreciate sort of speaking to that as the base, but I'm fairly confident, having watched us approve a fire station once before, albeit part of a public safety building, that, see, was it something I said?
You created a call,
I
just like.
guess. I have that effect on people. But to the extent that there's anybody who thinks that what we have currently is fine, they're probably not well. As relates to what to do now that we know that we need a new building, obviously we did something and that didn't pan out for us. And so there's a little money left over from that. We'll talk about that another day. And so here we are trying to decide what to do next. But I did sort of want to put out there, because I sort of heard at the end this sort of idea that these folks are entitled finally to something is not a result of the folks in town, right? They've wanted for some significant amount of time for this to be ameliorated, and it didn't work out that way, but that wasn't the issue. Now, I do recollect, and I'll get more to it later, that there were earlier inculcations where sticker shock was a problem. And so now let me get to my questions, because yikes. One question I had was regarding Medfield. I thought Medfield was a public safety building,
It is.
but it was pitched as fire, right? So it's both. I'm not wrong.
You're correct. It's a
Okay.
police and fire station.
I know you said Sharon was public safety, but I had thought it was public safety, and then you were talking about it as fire, so then I was like madly like trying to figure out like where the hell is the fire station as compared to the police station, because I thought they were in the same building, and they are. Okay. So Medfield, if it were to be built today, would be significantly more expensive, but it's police and fire,
Correct.
correct? All right, just so we're all talking apples and apples. My question, I had a couple of sort of high-level questions, and then I'll let these guys have some questions, and then maybe I'll ask a couple more before we turn it up over to other folks. But I know that, and I recognize that the expense to build grows every year. But I also know that right now it is substantially inflated in a manner that has more to do with potentially short-term issues in the market than it does with the long-term cost of building. How much, if any, of the expense that you have laid out is as a result of sort of that sharp increase in cost due to not being able to get things over the border or lack of labor?
Right. So, great question, and you'll see in your packet that there is an escalation cost that's in there. Again, that is to protect the budget right now. We think the nice thing you have going for you is you're not trying to build right now, right? The idea here is that you will stop building in 2023. So things, maybe I should go back to that slide.
No, I mean, I have it in here, but yeah, maybe.
Okay. Just for the folks at home, we do have that escalation factor. So when we look at this right now, the escalation factor is just over 4%. So what we're hoping, with our fingers crossed as well, is that by the time we're looking to start construction, which would be in March of 2023, that when those bids come in December, they're lower. We don't have a crystal ball, but the good news is we hope that we've been through the worst of it, right? So we've all seen it on TV where all the boats are backed up on the coasts and things like that. And we also have some control over that, right? So we can specify products that are local. We also have the ability to specify products that are readily available. So one of the things that Matt has brought to the table as a facilities director is all those sorts of things, right? We want things that are consistent within the town. We want things that are easy to maintain and operate. And we're going to be able to work together as a team to make sure that we're speccing things that are readily available.
So is your answer then that the place where the spike, for lack of a better term, is just in the additional contingency costs? It's not in the underlying 18 million and change number?
Actually, the number which is shown here, this is the construction cost. Maybe my cursor will work. There it is.
Yeah.
This is construction cost phasing and escalation. Okay, so the number is
Is that
in-
for the new building? I thought that was the,
It's a new building.
Yes, this is the new construction option.
okay.
So,
Mine had, I had the 18 million circled at the bottom. I got it now.
yeah,
Yep. So this,
Can you just clarify a point from what they just said?
yeah.
So what you're saying is that typically what we're told is, costs escalate every year, and that's just a known fact. And the longer you wait to do something, the more it's going to cost later on down the road.
that's correct.
But from what you just said, it is at such a spike right now that you actually believe that if we were to wait until when we would be going out to bid with this schedule, we might actually see a decline from what we would pay if we were starting construction tomorrow.
So I think the important thing is to have a project that's shovel-ready, so that when these things start to decline, you're ready to build. And so if you were building tomorrow, these numbers are not, this 17,879,000 knows you're not building tomorrow.
Yep.
So what we've done is we've put in escalation costs, so that we know we're bidding in December of 2022, and that you're starting construction in the spring. So that's what I mean by the escalation costs that are in that hard cost number. Those contingency numbers are on top of that, right? Because what we want to do right now is protect the budget to the point where there's good news at the end of this tunnel, and not have to come back and say, well, we didn't plan for X, Y, Z back in the concept phase.
So I'm going to jump back on top of what he said
Yeah.
for two. I found it. So the escalation is the 619,809. That's an educated guess, correct?
Correct.
Which is, I understand, right? I understand that I'm not trying to make you guys sign in blood on, I understand educated guess.
Right.
But where are you getting your number for what the cost is? Like, how are you projecting? If you've sent Matt out, who is really good at finding stuff,
Yeah.
how is he finding today
No,
costs? Like, how are you making this shovel ready for folks so that when we're trying to sell this, act now,
Yeah.
because it's going to be ridiculous if you don't. How are we going to be able to say to them that it's not going to be like the paint, where we thought it was going to be X,
Yeah.
and then oops, oh, now that we've already spent another $6 million, we're kind of in it. Like, well, I guess we're just going to have to keep going. How do we prevent that?
So, hi, everyone. I'm Don Walter with Dorn Whittier. So we have a professional cost estimator who's doing these cost estimates for us. And what he's doing is he's gauging the market today and looking out into the future, as Ron has been saying. So the estimates are not just numbers, but they're actually done in quite a bit of detail with the understanding of how we design buildings. So we design buildings in terms of their structural systems, the materials being used, the finishes being used, the systems in the buildings. And a lot of that has been discussed actually already at the building committee level with the fire department. So we feel comfortable with where those numbers are today, but keeping in mind that those numbers are higher today because of the pandemic also. So everything,
was the other part of it.
so everything just keeps building on itself. So we have numbers that are escalated today just because of the market today. And as you look out into the future, you're escalating those numbers even more. So it's a tough time to know exactly where things are going to be a year from now. That's why, as Ron is saying, if you decide to continue to move forward, what we would suggest is that you get this to a point where you can bid it and you actually do bid the project, so then you know exactly what the cost is going to be. And at that time, if you say, this is just too expensive for us, you don't have to award the bid. You can sit on it, or if we're fortunate that the numbers are where everyone's comfortable, we bid it and we construct the project.
So that actually sort of answers the question, which I think also Kevin was sort of alluding to as well, is where sort of is that spike also, if at all, built into the actual cost, not the exigency, the actual cost. And it is in there, which is just useful information for me. But to your second point about the fact of being shovel-ready, which I'm also mindful of, pushing back a little bit to the extent that if, just as a spoiler alert, I'll never be the person not to say trust but verify. And then if this is the only model that you think can do the job, and I'm not finished asking questions, but let's hypothetically say that, yep, this is bare bones, everybody's happy, union's happy, firefighters are happy, everybody's happy, this is it, this is bare bones, there's very little we could do, then I'm not going to prevent anything in progress, right? And then you get to town meeting and they say, the heck, can't do it, can't imagine it, can't pay for it. With the work that has already been done at that point, this is, I guess, my long-winded way of saying the question. Once you've done the schematics, can you pivot with any of the work that has been done? And so you haven't lost all of the money and come back with sort of a plan B with some. So can you rescue some of the work that's been done and reuse it in the event that you end up with a situation where at substantially the same time as you are asking for this amount of money, there is an ask potentially for a wing to a school that's absolutely crushed to the gills, and a population, at least a portion of which are aging and on a fixed income, and get more folks to the meeting. And if that happens and there's pushback, how much, if anything, can you do to sort of help create a plan B so that the folks who are sitting in the little tiny shed basically at the fire station don't think, pardon my language, crap, this is going to go all the way to town meeting, it's going to take forever, and then if it fails, we're going to be back to where we were in '09 and in '15, and we're still going to be in this box 5 years from now. How do we prevent that? That's
So John Lemieux from Vertex. I think it's a great question, but I think we're at a time now that this is the start of that discussion. If you think there needs to be a plan B, we need to let these guys know that there needs to be a plan B right now, because what's going to happen from this point is this program, and again, program drives square footage drives cost. It's a simple math equation, A times B equals C. And we can all discuss what goes into B as far as how much of it costs per square foot. But the reality is that we will continue, sticker shock, if anyone has an issue, so the question should be, Chief, 25,690 square feet, the only way to get that number down is to take square footage out of the building. So if the concern right now is that this is a little bit too much, he needs to go back and sit down with the project team and say, what are we going to cut? So we can't, so there becomes
That makes
this,
sense.
there becomes this battle between, well, we should really get them what they need. Well, we can't really afford to pay for it. We need to have those discussions now, because nobody wants the situation you're talking about, where we get to a town meeting, which happened, and it happens. I watched it happen in a town west of here, and it was horrible. And they got all the way, they got really far, and it died, and it was really bad. That being said, if we're convinced about the square footage in the program, listen, the numbers here are conservative, okay? You divide that 17.8 million by 25,000 or so square feet, it's about $690 a square foot, $695. Is that high? Yes. We bid a building a few weeks ago and it was just under $610. Not a fire station, but a public building. The truth is going to be somewhere between $690 and $610. And the best we can do for you as your team is, as they continue with this design, we will check this number more than one more time, at least two more times. They'll check it, our guy will check it, and those two guys will sit down together and argue about why he sees it one way and she sees it another way, and they'll reconcile that so that we'll know that, okay, this is the real number. Also, we talked about the community outreach. It's only just started, but it's about, really getting the information out there that this is the building. Why do we need it? Go see the chief. And really up that campaign of education, because you've seen that whatever you do to cut this shorter, okay, make it smaller, you can do. If you have to do it, you do it. But the need will still be there. And then you'll go back to get that other half of the square footage 8 years from now, and you're going to be shocked when it's not 50% of this number. It'll be 80% of this number because of the inefficiencies and all of that. So, I think that there's, obviously, COVID pricing is crazy right now. The fact that we're doing a community center in Upton for $607, $610 a square foot is nuts, but that's what the market bears right now. We're all hopeful that it comes down. We're all hopeful that as inflation recedes a little bit, that we'll start to see it. But as it goes down, we're adding that 4 to 5% a year going the other way. So it's always going to cost more. So the question is, are we ever going to see a $550 a square foot building again? Probably not. Can we see it go back under 6? Yeah, maybe. But again, we're not doing our job if we don't put $690 in this number and say, hey, this is conservative, because what can be really bad is if we came to you with $610 and said, hey, this is the number right now, and put a little bit more on top of that, we're going to get ourselves into trouble. It might work out, it might not. So we would rather price these things so that on bid day, that 17.8 comes up on the bid sheet somewhere in the middle to the bottom of the bid sheet. So that we're asking for, out of 7 numbers, this is the 4th or 5th place number. And you get a good deal coming out of number 1. But until we get closer,
right.
we can't, if we could crystal ball that, boy, we could make a lot of money. But we're giving you the best info we have with the best info we have with the, the best intelligence we have, I guess, at the time for right now. So I guess, this is more of a, if you're comfortable with the work the committee has done from a programming standpoint and the chief and looking at that number, and first it's 30, now it's 25 and change. If we're good with that, we commit to you to continue to monitor those numbers, keep things tight, and continue to update and educate along the way to other folks. But a plan B is something that I'm not so sure there's been a whole lot of thought given to at this point, because it is a huge pivot. And the longer you wait, you're asking them to have a whole separate design, especially if it's a new building. In a reno, maybe there's a little more flexibility there, because you're just not going to do something. But if you're going to build new, what aren't you going to do? If you say, this isn't good, or we don't want to do this. So.
Right, okay, so I hear that, and what I'm understanding, at least, is sort of the simplest way of explaining the cost is the size, not that's the only explanation, but that to the extent just for tonight, so that we get out of here at a reasonable time, we'll just assume that it's the size. What I'd also heard is that one of the pieces of the size, if I'm not mistaken, are the bays where the apparatus, it's Greek apparatuses? It's Latin apparatus? I don't know, whatever. The trucks. Apparati. The trucks get parked. And I also heard, great news, we don't need to go to the other place in order, and I'm not advocating for a plan B. I'm just telling you, it's coming. People are going to start talking about it. There are trucks over at the old town hall, and someone has to go running across the street. And so, yeah, if there's a brush fire in a place where there's no access to water, and we don't have a fancy new sexy truck to do it, that is going to happen. My question then would be, if you're saying that the time to decide what to do, if town meeting decides, sort of the town decides, or at town meeting, that this is too rich for our blood, we'd have to have a plan B now or ish, because it's too late then. And I'm mindful of what you're saying regarding outreach. I'm also mindful that that doesn't always work. And but I also think, even as I'm saying it, if you have a plan B, people are gonna be like, well, why aren't you doing the plan B? Well, because it's not optimal. It's why it's B. So is it possible to for us to say, all right, let's go with A, off you go to your schematic business, no, but with while you're there, if it's possible to move some of the less utilized trucks back across the street, can you be thinking about that, right? I mean, because I understand what the chief is saying regarding the increase in calls, but I also suspect that, as he indicated with respect to ALS, the increase in calls has to do with life support and life saving, which are the little trucks that are already in and would likely be in, as opposed to the one that's across the street. And so in an ideal world, everybody's all in one place. They're protected from the weather. They're not jammed up against each other, and they're all there. But in a slightly less ideal world, when we have one traffic light, 10, 12,000 people, the occasional structure fire, a lot of traffic to and from the prison, and a population on a fixed income, I just think it's not a bad idea to have in the back of your head, so that the folks in fire aren't left for another 5 years in the event that the town meeting, as I'm sure you know, town meetings get filled with the people who do the best job of putting the butts in the seats, right? Which is its own form of democracy. And to the extent that the folks who've been out and meeting with people and listening to all of the build talk think it's a great idea or it's a good idea, a lot of them may assume, other people will go to town meeting, I don't need to go. Whereas all of the folks who think, I can't afford any more, get all their friends to go. And right? And it goes down the tube. So I don't understand, is it possible to say, fine, off to schematic, but when you're there doing your business, also, yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Hey,
So,
that's a long-winded way of getting there. But
and with my answer, I will suggest that now that we're going to have this conversation, we can talk about ways to bid a project, have everything designed into the project that belongs there, but bid it in such a way that you can say, well,
In phases.
using your example that maybe a couple of bays end up across the street or something, right? You can do these as bid alternates, so you can bid the project with the full project and do what we call a deduct alternate and take those out to save money. Or you can do it the reverse way and do an add alternate. So there are many different things that we can look at. And it's good that we're talking about it now, because that will influence the design. You have to build an alternate into a project that can
Right,
be easily plugged in or pulled out. So,
And I'm by no means indicting what you guys have been talking about or deciding, or I just worry that if you went off without knowing that there is at least a possibility, and I know that just because of the traffic that I'm getting, have you?
sure.
Yeah, and the only,
Like, it just would be nice to know that
the only
that,
caveat I would say, though, is if it became something about bays. Bays are about 2,200 square feet apiece or so.
Yeah, a couple thousand.
Just understand that it's not 2,200 times that 700 a square foot. It's a less expensive space because it's a big
Right,
open
right,
box. You know, the step down of 2,000 feet less
no,
and
I was,
2,000 feet less.
I get that. I just was, apologies for oversimplifying. I just wanted to say that I understand, but that, how do I make sure that the fire department, and the firefighters and the chief aren't left with another 5 years or more, and the town has even less money than it did after what happened with the police. And so I think I'm hearing,
Yep.
what I'm hearing is that, I'm hearing lots of great questions, which I know that's probably in a book somewhere, just to let the people know, I'm writing that down. I'm gonna compliment people on their questions, but I'm also hearing that it's good that it's been raised. We don't need to design plans B, C, and D, but just be mindful that is out there so that what you do design can pivot, use your language, and not leave the folks from the fire department literally out in the cold. So I've yammered long enough. Do you?
I'm going to go in the other direction a little bit. In 1994, this town was putting an addition onto the H. Olive Day School. And they decided the addition was way too big and it needed to be cut back, and it was much smaller addition was done than what was, and now we're in a situation where we might need to add a wing on a school because we don't have enough space in our schools. And had we not been penny wise and pound foolish, we wouldn't have competing projects at this time. And I'm concerned to see that in 20 years ago, they said you needed 23,686 square feet. And now you're coming with a proposal that's 25,690 feet. And I'm gonna ask the chief, like, are we gonna be here again? Because that's 20 years ago number. It's not a very big increase. And is this indeed maybe not that I understand fixed income and I understand that, but I also see that this is not the conditions we need for our fire department. And are we making a decision that we will down the road inevitably because it's too small?
So a lot of work has been put into trying to understand what the build out of the town could be with the way the zoning is now. Not that it can't change, but I think the hope and desire that this town will remain a suburban, town. It's not going to become this urban, heavily, densely populated area. So one of the things that's very positive is the location of the current facility and proposed location for the new facility being on the same site is very advantageous because we have easy access and quick access to all corners of the town. So the demand or potential for another facility is low. I can't say definitively we won't ever need a second station, but it's unlikely. I think the other piece of that too is, that was one of the things that was difficult working in the program. I probably, I did some iterations before I got their questionnaire, probably 3 or 4, and then I did several more once I had the questionnaire and we started working back and forth, trying to, just foresee what will the needs or demands of the department be. And I believe somewhere in the documentation that you have, it's documented that there is room for a little less than 6% growth in this design and in this building. And primarily that is to accommodate future full-time staff so that we don't have to do exactly what you're saying, in 4 years or 5 years. Quite honestly, it's easy. We have the workload present right now to have 5 people per shift. We can't accommodate it. Quite honestly, if the call numbers keep increasing as they are, we're going to need more full-time people. And there is that growth is built into the facility. One thing I did spend a lot of time doing is looking at the apparatus complement, looking at we're not going to be in a position where we're needing to buy new apparatus. I think one of the things that I look to do and that we've done with the design team is just like with our apparatus, I don't want anything that is not multifaceted or has multiple uses. The same thing with the building. Almost all of the office spaces are multifaceted, multifunctional. So different missions or different divisions within the organization can use the facility, use those offices that we have, and use the spaces, whether it be for training, administrative things, prevention, community outreach. All of the spaces are designed keeping that in mind so that, again, we can keep a tight building and keep a square footage number down at 25,000, but still accomplish the mission and leave some room for growth. We didn't go crazy with having a ton of space for growth because, I foresee the max out of our personnel being, in that neighborhood of 8 to 10 people, and we're trying to accommodate that. And that space just wouldn't be dead if we were to build this building. We would be using that space now when we have storm coverage and things of that nature. So there is room in the building for growth. But the one thing that usually adds a ton of square footage, what they alluded to, which is apparatus, I don't see us having to expand or grow the number of apparatus we have, which is significant. I think the apparatus complement we've had probably for the last 50 years has been sufficient. As we continue to grow, our reliance and dependence upon neighboring communities to provide mutual aid and automatic aid is a much more effective use of those resources, and it works for all of us collectively. We also have a complement enough where we have a little bit of redundancy built in, which is important. Things happen, things break. We want to make sure we can answer the call. So most importantly, being able to answer the call and properly house those resources, we do have that capability built into this, and we've taken advantage of technology, taken advantage of new advancements in technology to keep the building tight and small. To accomplish the mission, we don't have to add much to that footprint, even though that footprint is 20 plus years old.
Thank you. Thank you. And the other thing that I wanted to say was I liked, at the beginning of your presentation, I thought it was nice to hear of committees coming together and the community coming together and communities around us coming together to have this be as informed as possible. And I was grateful for that work. Thank you very much.
And as John said, that's just beginning. We've got a lot of work to do to get out into the community and let them know the rhyme and the reason behind what we're doing.
Well, that's one of the advantages too, I would expect for your bench, because I was noting when I was madly Googling, because I thought it was that it was your name on the Medfield building. So you have that ability with the bench, which my recollection is that was why you were, one of the reasons you were selected. And it's nice to be able to see that now. Kevin, questions?
Yes. So first and foremost, thank you for the presentation. Thank you for so accurately and comprehensively outlining everything that we needed to be able to get past this first stage. When we commissioned this committee back last year, I think all of us shared the perspective that there was an urgent need to be able to address this, but this was the best way to go about it to ensure that we were put into a position for success when we do eventually get before the town. So Appreciate all the efforts put into where we are tonight. My first question is related to a note in how you were able to accommodate a reduction in space. You said you removed the need for a locker room. What does that mean?
Yep. So in in most fire stations, what you'll find is that there's a locker room, right? So when the firefighters come in, they can change out of their day clothes into their work clothes, if you will. What we've done is we've actually put those lockers right outside the dorm room. So that what we've done is we've taken a larger space that needs all sorts of ventilation and everything else, which is dedicated just to that, and gotten rid of that and made the hallway, if you will, out in front of the dorm room a little bit larger, so that each staff member has their own locker, if you will, for their bedding, for their clothing, so that when they come in, they can swap things out. And we don't have to go through the expense of all of that space. One of the things we learned from the fire stations that we met, and from all of the experience that the chief brought, as well as some of his staff members, why have a locker room, right? What we really need is a bigger locker and a well-placed locker. What we don't need is a big locker room. So it was, quite frankly, it's that process that got us from a 2001 program of 23,000 square feet to where we are today at 25,000. So even though we lost the name locker room on a room, all of the uses and all of the function of that locker room is built into the dorm rooms.
Gotcha.
I think one of the other things that we're looking at is, the facility, the way it's laid out now, is very gender neutral. There is no need for a women's locker room, men's locker room. Every individual, within a department will have their locker space, and even the restrooms while there has to be men and women's in public areas, for example, but all of the restrooms where the operational space is will be gender neutral. So our female firefighters can use them, our male firefighters can use them. The way the building is set up, that allows us to save and conserve space as well as be, more aware and more accepting of the way, things are transitioning in our society. It makes the building more conducive and more accepting of everyone and anyone that walks through those doors. So that was an important factor that kind of led us down that path to eliminate the need for a locker room. I think another thing was just the station tours and the amount of square footage that was taken up with locker room facilities, and you really look at what's the use time of a locker room. It's very minimal. They're in and out, and that takes up a very large footprint. In all the facilities we visited that had locker rooms, it took up a very large footprint of the building, which means it's a lot of space that is in essence dead and not being used for a substantial amount of anything. It's just, hey, I'm going in to change or maybe take a shower and that's it. Well, that's a very small window or small portion of time that the personnel are actually using it. So we've eliminated that, again, just by incorporating those spaces into kind of the dorm room and hallway setup.
Thank you. Thank you.
My next question is related to short-term planning. So right now we have $3.3 million that was left over from the previous public safety project. Obviously, conditions are pretty terrible right now. Is there anything built in terms of short-term improvements to conditions that we could utilize that money for as part of the project, or is that not part of what we're considering at this point?
I'm going to let Blythe take that one.
So we've talked about that a lot. What we've identified is the $3.3 million will enable us to go through this design process and get to the bidding stage. And another key component that we need to do is to swap out the trailer. The trailer is too small, especially as the chief has just identified. We just got to 4 people on a shift about 2 years ago. We really need to get to 5 for some shifts. And it's not possible to do in the space that there is. So what we've also identified is we would swap the trailer out for a double wide type facility. We expect that staff would be in it for approximately 2 years. And on a rental basis, if it would just be a year, it would probably be, some some savings, but for as long as we're gonna need it, we're probably best off to buy one, and that is included in the budget for $500,000. So 3.3 million would go towards design and replacement of that trailer. Whether we keep the trailer at the end, or we use it somewhere else in town, or we sell it, is something that we could look at doing.
Yeah, so that was one thing that we did talk about as a committee that would be important, that if nothing else came out of this process, at least we had some money to get a set of plans that could go to construction when the conditions dictated, and at least improve the trailer conditions at the site. That's obviously not the ideal situation that anybody wants, but it would at least improve the conditions some small amount.
Enable us to, if the voters say, it's just too much and we can't go there, then at least we have built in a little bit more space for that growth when it's gonna come, because it's gonna come. And the folks we depend on every day are in a better situation than they are right now.
I mean, much too, as you saw, just between Cece and Anita, right? The two perspectives that are out there that are being represented, not necessarily indefinitely. I know that everybody is respectful of everything that's out there, but we have to walk this line of being able to deliver on a commitment that was promised to the community when they first voted on this combination project, and being mindful of the impact that this is going to have in terms of annual taxes for everybody who pays into them. We're a very residential community. The residential burden shoulders most of these kinds of projects. So we're going to have to make that a big consideration as we move forward, especially with the community engagement pieces and identifying to people upfront and transparently exactly what this impact will look like at the level that we're going to be proposing it. So just wanted to call that out as well. You had mentioned community outreach next steps. I think I saw a preliminary schedule at one point that kind of highlighted a calendar of when these community meetings would be structured. What does the going forward schedule look like for those?
What we want to do is sit down with Blythe and the chief, and we want to, after the holidays, obviously, take a look at what community events that you have coming up during the 2022 year, and we want to piggyback on those. That's the schedule we had shown earlier, is to have these regular meetings right through the entire 2022 year. And if you have things, I hate to use the holidays again, but if you have something in October, like an Oktoberfest, or something in the summer, something in the spring, we want to be there, we want to be presenting, and we want to be able to have informational sessions where residents can ask questions. They can learn a little bit more about the project. We keep them informed, and we can hear, like you say, we can hear what their concerns are and try to address those.
Just give us a reason to have Oktoberfest in Norfolk right there.
Well, yeah. Also, I was thinking of all of those, the parties or they're not parties, right there.
Events.
Events, yes.
Functions.
Yes, functions. And then I'm just imagining everybody with a few draft brews on board, staggering around the fire station, and I was like, I don't know, it seems like the perfect storm, but it also could be, it could work. Get buy-in, sorry.
So that's a great point, having a couple of events at the fire station so community members can actually see the conditions, because quite frankly, it's kind of hard to believe.
We've done it before, that's
yeah.
why we're talking, they had people go out, and I really think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, because I remember the meetings where it failed and the meeting where it passed. And I know that there had been folks who toured it when it had failed, but I think that there was a much more, I don't think anyone expected that it was going to fail. And then when it did, there became a more concerted effort. And we're not kidding. This isn't just, everybody wants to have the newest, greatest, best. This is suboptimal living conditions for the people you want to save your life. So come on over. And people came out with it was a real paradigm shift. So, for whatever that's worth.
My last question is just some more details surrounding, should we vote to move forward tonight, what the next steps are in the immediate future?
So in the immediate future, we're going to take this concept design, and we're going to do exactly what you've asked us to do. Roll up our sleeves, start taking a look at what are the systems going in, what are the materials and products going in, so that we make sure that we can keep this number down as best we can, so that we're avoiding any of the pitfalls. The great thing that Don mentioned about our cost estimator is he knows, right? They know, PMC knows where the problem children are. Like, what are those products and systems that are hard to come by? And so we can take a look at that. So that's pretty much the next step. It's also to meet with the planning board. It's to meet with the zoning board. It's to meet with the health department again and the water department again, just to make sure that we are reducing costs as best we can with those boards. So there's a lot of things in the zoning ordinance that we can take a look at. They talked about helping us out with the church property, like maybe if that gets rezoned, or if there's some kind of special permit. Again, every square foot of pavement that we don't have to build saves money.
Gotcha.
And so that's, part of the next step.
If I could add to that, if the board were to grant them permission to move to schematic design, we would need to amend their both contracts for Vertex and Doran Whittier to negotiate a fee for them to do that work. As you may recall, we only authorized them through feasibility. So I would work over the holidays with the chief and the committee to negotiate those contracts, bring back to you either the January 4th or 18th meeting, so that they know that they're going to get paid to do that work, and you're comfortable with what that would look like.
Great. All right, one more, sorry, I have a bonus question. As a former planning board person, you said you had gone before the planning board in a very preliminary fashion just to talk about some of the perceived limitations of the site and the zoning as it existed today. And the feedback you had gotten was that they wanted to see something more specific before they would give you any insight, or did they give you any indication of?
Oh, no, they were very helpful. So they take a look at the church and they said, yeah, maybe there's something we need to do there, because it just doesn't, it's not a residence, it's not someone's home, it's the church. And the church can live in all sorts of different zoning areas, right? So rezoning that is certainly an option. They talked about the setbacks against the property, where we're going to need a green buffer, or a green belt, I should say, between the residents on the east side of the property. And they talked about, well, let's leave the trees in place, right? And then we'll just supplement those trees. So we're not planting the exact letter of the law, but we're meeting the intent of having a natural screen there. So I think they're very helpful in giving us some guidance. But to your point, they also said, get this to a point where you can come back to us and we can review this collectively.
More definitively.
And they want us to go in front of the design review board
Yep.
for their comments in order to come back to the planning board. So that's also part of the next step.
Great.
Pitched roofs are important to them in the B1 zoning district, and that may affect all the way around the building, and we have to get clarity on whether it's just the front and the sides. If you really can't see the back, is that something that we're going to need to meet, because pitched roofs cost more than other types, and it goes back to the overall cost of the project. Want to meet the letter of the law, the spirit of what the town wants, trying to keep it as cost effective as we can.
Find that balance, that's right. All right, thank you so much.
I just have a couple of last minute before seeing if anybody else has anything. I know that there's also, in terms of it's small town and people talk and you hear things, I know that there had been some consternation, which I would imagine had come from a place of concern that if things were too grand, they would never pass. And that, spoken as the folks who are living in the box on the property, that would be incredibly concerning. Did you reach out and enlist the firefighters, the union, et cetera, and get how they feel about this particular plan, or at least not like plan, but the 25,000 and changes? Are they comfortable, knowing that, maybe there's going to be a plan B, however that works out? What's been the consensus? Because I know that at some point there would have been perhaps some consternation.
We've obviously, with this, I think this process has been very much open, and every single one of the meetings we've had with Doran Whittier on site at the fire station, the union has been well represented with several staff. Matter of fact, we had to move one of the meetings from the firehouse to this room because we had so many people. So they have been able to speak into the process. They've even drafted a letter with some concerns, and those concerns were addressed and brought to the table. And after looking at the concerns and what it potentially would do to the building in terms of square footage and cost, they were like, yeah, we don't, that's not a, they are very much involved and have their eye and are tracking, you know, things that are important to them, but also as community members, they're tracking things that are important to not having the building be, as people would label a Taj Mahal or grandiose. They're very much in tune to what is appropriate and what is needed, and have been very much a part of the process. I'm actually very happy and very proud of what they've contributed, and also very thankful that we've selected Vertex and Dorian Ritter, because they have taken those concerns when brought to the table and immediately went and tried to address them. They immediately put something in design or on paper so that we could see what that impact was, and then make a determination, hey, we don't want to go there. That's adding, extra cost that we don't need to incur. We want to keep the building tight and as efficient as possible. So, we move on from it and know that, in this next phase, there may be ways to accommodate, some of those wishes, in kind of moving those boxes around as the building continues to develop and be laid out. So, we look forward to continuing to engage and having the union members continue to engage, in this process as we move forward.
From our perspective, we've done a lot of these fire and police stations throughout the Commonwealth, and how invigorating it's been for us in the process to have the chief there and the firefighters participate in these work groups. We're meeting weekly. So these people they're taking their time to come in and sit with us, and they're participating wholeheartedly and providing great feedback to what we're presenting. So it's really been a communal effort with the fire department and, of course, with the working group and the building committee to get where we are. So it's been, really kind of astonishing in some ways.
That's great to hear.
Yeah.
And then my last question before I shut up. I know that it's on the left-hand side in the little tiny print with the word draft across it. But admittedly, I didn't see it until I heard about it. And I know that folks who know me know that I'm Scottish, so I'm really cheap. And so I hear I think that you guys should have whatever you want, but I hear $500,000 for a double wide for 2 years. And I'm like, my eyeballs are coming out of my head. But then I look at it on the preliminary budget on the right, and it's not there. Is it just like, right, like am I missing a number? Because when I add down and down and down, I see every cost. Is it just sort of left out of the, I see
So when you see this little number over here,
the 17,879?
I'm sorry, this one right here, the 25,
Right.
115,
I see that it's
119.
included in that on the left. I'm asking
Right.
why it's not on the right.
Oh, because we just,
Didn't want the $500,000 double wide that we're going to use for 2 years in
No,
larger
not
print?
at all. No, we just, what I was trying to do is summarize this. And
So-
to your point about the 500,000, I think that's another piece of the puzzle here, that this is the concept right now. That 500,000 is a very conservative number. In fact, Steve, who works with John, came to the table with one option that could cost up to $500,000. Matt came to the table with some things that he was looking at from the town's perspective.
Fair
that
enough.
was-
I imagine Matt found something on eBay that would be like a triple wide with multiple floors for $37,000, and I would want to live in it. So I just wanted to make sure I wasn't challenging
Yeah.
and saying, "Oh, I'm not voting for the schematic." I just want to make sure that to the same extent as everything else could be contemplative of a Plan B, you recognize that there are people in town
Yeah.
who, on their best day, wouldn't imagine living in a $500,000 home, let alone only for 2 years, and then with no sort of, like, and I know Blythe's talking about, then you sell it. I get that. I just
Yeah.
wanted to put a thumbtack in it. I know it seems silly, but I'm cheap, so.
I think one of the things too that, that's an estimate, and like you said, it's a conservative number, and one of the reasons I think we arrived at that number is because there is significant site work and then things that we don't have a crystal ball in
I
terms of like the
absolutely
strapping
understand. I
and
just
what the building code's gonna require from comparison
Wanted to make
wise.
sure we weren't
Yeah.
running out to, you know,
And
giant
Also-
trailers are
Right.
us.
I think it's also very important, and we tried to do this to make sure that we're giving you, I don't want to really say worst-case scenario what this all
Sure.
can cost, but, you know, very sensitive to, we put a number out there and we don't want to come back to you and say it needs to be more. So, you know, we've talked a lot and we'll continue to talk about how we narrow down those contingencies and we get this project down and there's a better way to get to a trailer or an outcome that's lower. We're all for it. We're going to find it.
Absolutely. No, I completely understand that. I just was like, woo. So,
And as it relates to the modular, not to beat the dead horse, but we'll look at leasing options versus purchase options also, because depending on how long you're gonna have it, it may be more advantageous to lease, but if you're gonna have it longer, it's more advantageous to buy. So we look at all those
yeah,
options.
which Blake did mention.
Yeah.
So, before we vote, I did indicate, because this was an important issue, not that there aren't all important, but this is an issue where we certainly ran up against issues with transparency in prior inculcations of the safety building. And so to that extent, do we have any questions? I'll start with the audience, although I suspect no, but you don't want to make an assumption.
I'd just like to make a statement as the union president.
Do you want to take a mic so that they can hear you on the camera?
Sorry about my appearance this afternoon.
No worries.
Hold on, just make sure that's on.
All right, my name's Seth Hamilton. I'm the union president here in Norfolk. I just wanted to make a statement that we, as a group, have done as much as we possibly can to make this a needs building and not a wants building. I wanted to reiterate that. We've spent countless years in a trailer. We've dedicated ourselves to be completely professional throughout this entire time, and we've loved every minute of it. But this is still turned into a needs building. We want it to pass. We didn't add anything we don't need. This is for future growth. This profession is truly a profession. Most people have college educations. Even without a college education, you've spent 3 years in school to get this job. So again, this is a needs building. There's no fluff to it. It does look, I'm sure it's going to look beautiful and be amazing, but there's no Taj Mahal to it at all. This is a professional building, and it's going to be used as one.
Thanks, Seth.
Thank you.
Thank you. And before I open, I will say that you nailed it in terms of people who've commented saying, I just want to know that this is, I'll use your term, a needs building, that this isn't like some wish list of things, because people at home are on budgets where they're not. And I'm not talking about in terms of avoiding a situation like H Olive Day, but like just like a true needs, but not so tight that 3 years we're back. So
And may I say one more thing?
Sure.
I was thinking about your plan B, and maybe it isn't necessarily a plan B, but a phased approach, like, can we build this, and then when we can afford it, we can add this, and then when we can afford it, add this. I don't know if that's a possibility,
I
but
think that's what he
it
said. He
is.
had some fancy words for it.
I liked it.
Yes.
Okay.
We can
I was
craft
thinking
bid
Legos.
alternates, we call them, so.
Bid
Bid
alternates that are
Mm-hmm.
like a Lego kit that you can add on later, about as cheap as a Lego kit, too.
Just exactly the same.
Well,
So any
I don't know,
other
Legos are
comments
expensive.
from the folks in the audience before I don't see anyone diving on a microphone. Is there anyone at home? All right, seeing nobody commenting in either place, I guess we just go to the motion, right?
I move that the board approve the feasibility study and authorize the fire station building committee to commence schematic design.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everybody.
For spending,
Thank you, everybody, for the commitment
For all of
and
the
the
work.
work, then the partnership. Really grateful, and I'm sorry that it is the way it is.
Kevin, if you could pass along to the committee as well, our appreciation for everything up until this point, and obviously the ongoing efforts moving forward, we appreciate it.
I will. Most of them are here tonight, so.
yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, thank
And
you.
happy holidays.
Yes.
Happy holidays as well. Thank you.
So we'll be working with them on contract.
On the contract, perfect.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Chief/IT professional.
Chief was there earlier when I was getting my booster, and I was like, oh, what are all the fire folks here for? And then I remembered you're supposed to wait for 15 minutes, and I was talking to someone, And all of a sudden, the room was like going zzz, and I was like, like just basically, I texted Sean. I was like, I refuse to keel over in front of these people that I know. I'm leaving in 20 minutes, but I managed to keep it together and not pass out. So there, yeah. All right, moving on.
Thank you, Ron.
Thank you. We
Don.
lost our whole audience.
You know, the parody of,
Oh, there's people.
Yeah.
Yes.
There's people here.
I just meant like of live people, which I like having live.
And Mr. Haddad
I
is
just can't
back.
believe that nobody touched on the parody that our professional resources here were Ron, John, and Don. Nobody was going to mention that? Or
I
make
didn't
it-
even. I didn't even see that.
Ah,
I was too busy with loftier pursuits.
it's a missed opportunity.
Well, you say potato. I say potato. All right, next. I can't. I've got to go back.
Class 2 auto.
Oh, that's right. So, Blythe, can you fill us in on? I know that the last time we met, we had lots of signing to do for everybody else, but we held one in abeyance.
We did, which is Carvana LLC, which, as you know, operates on Dedham Street, and of buying and selling of cars through the internet. So there's been a lot of work done on this, and joining us tonight from Carvana is Melissa Wilkins and John Lee. I can see Melissa's
That's
picture
Melissa.
there.
Oh, I see John.
So what we've identified and working with them is that they have really two issues at hand. Because the zoning requires them to keep all the cars either for sale or sold behind the fence, and they've been growing and doing really well, which we're thrilled about, it's they don't have the space to do that. So that's one issue. The second issue is that the zoning allows for one commercial vehicle for the property, and they actually have 16. So we've been back and forth with them. At first, we thought they just needed to file with the ZBA to amend, to get a special permit to have more commercial vehicles on site. But when we actually dug into it with the planning director and the zoning enforcement officer, it became clear that no, having more space behind the fence would be great, and they are working on that. They've diligently moved ahead to obtain a expansion of their lease from Orlando's Garage to be able to get about 2.5 more acres. But it's going to trigger a site plan approval process through the planning board. So they need to engage an engineer, they need to develop that plan, take it to the planning board. It may also trigger that the zoning requires their area behind the fence to be paved, and most of it is not. So this is all can be managed, but they need and deserve the time to be able to do that. And so we have explained to them what needs to happen. They have 1 or 2 engineers they can call on to do that. And we believe that 6 months would be a fair amount of time for them to be able to get the plan done, get it to the planning board, get through their process, simultaneously go to the ZBA, get approval for that as well. The commercial vehicles actually could be outside the fence on Dedham Street, where they also, in front. And the number of passenger vehicles you see for employees, those are fine to be where they are. They have, on any given day, as many as, 35 people coming to work,
Wow.
parking there, going and delivering cars, doing work on cars, working in the office, whatever it is. And that's all fine. There's no issue with any of that. So I can say, and I'd love for either Melissa or John to weigh in here, very pleased with how quickly they have stepped up to talking with us and working through it, and committed to doing so. I'd love you to hear from them about that. And then if you're comfortable with it, we would recommend an extension to July 1st. And as we get closer to July 1st, we'll see how they're doing with those other boards. You could choose to extend it a little longer. It's at the board's pleasure.
That was just going to be one of my questions, is if they begin to do or continue to do all of the work that they've been working with you on, but timing and life being everything, they aren't able to complete, but there's effort, right? Like, it's not just, we just started a week ago. Can we
Yes.
continue to,
You certainly can. It's up to you.
just because I'd hate to have the
Right.
only time that they have Nope. Be just that 6 months?
Nope.
So do either, before we ask any questions we may have, do either Mr. Lee or Ms. Wilkins have anything they'd like to add to what Blythe had to say?
Yeah, I think just to echo what Blythe said, we had a meeting yesterday and we're all on the same page and got up to speed on what needs to be done. So we are in compliance. We feel good about everything. I engaged our engineer that we normally use for our site plans, so we're already getting going on that, and we think that 6 months should be a reasonable amount of time to do everything we need to do. If for some reason we're coming up against the deadline, we'll definitely be in communication with everyone at the town. But I think we'll do whatever we need to do to come in compliance, and I think we feel like we're in a good spot to make that happen in 6 months.
Thank you. Blythe, or anybody, but Blythe, with respect to I certainly understand the need for more space. So I understand the lease component, and I'm thrilled that there are that many people, whether they're Norfolkians or just people, who are employed by just random things coming into my head at this point, are employed. That's great news. I'm just rank curiosity. Are the commercial vehicles, I know I think we talked about this before, are they a combination of heavier trucks and just cars with commercial plates, or what's the demo makeup?
14 of those white single-car carriers that they deliver cars to. Like if you bought one from them, they'd show up driving it with your car in the back, put it up.
Okay.
Yep. Visuals.
I love it.
And then there's a Prius and a Jeep, maybe, if I get it right, but it's two smaller vehicles.
Okay, but not like a flatbed, that has.
Well, it is
like,
a kind of a flatbed. It sits on it.
With the 18.
No.
With the up and the higher and the lower.
They may be delivered that way to there and then put behind the fence, and they've been
And that's
very
what you were
diligent
talking about.
about
Okay.
doing that. They get there perhaps that way, and then they're taken out to wherever they're going to be, their final destination on the smaller vehicles.
Got it. Thank you for clarifying that, because I know that had been one of the observations initially, was the larger, you see I don't know what they're called, right? Transport vehicles with the upper and the lower, and we all had them as Tonka trucks and drive up there. But I just want to make sure there weren't 16. I mean, It doesn't matter, but I was interested to see if there were 16 of those.
No.
Kevin, any questions?
None for mine, no.
No, thank you for partnering with one of our few businesses in town. and
Right? We do not want to
help
drive
them
out
find
one of the
success.
few
No, we don't.
We're glad to have
businesses while
them
we're
find
trying
success
to
here.
draw
So
business
Yep.
to us. So do I have a motion?
I move that the board approve and execute a Class 2 auto dealer license renewal until July 1, 2022 for Carvana LLC, subject to the receipt of all required documentation, inspections, and payment of fees.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you.
So next up is number 4.
Opioid litigation. So there's been a nationwide settlement of 2 different agreements regarding opioids, one for distributors and one for manufacturers. And those 2 situations will provide for states and communities $22.7 billion in future years to use to be able to remediate the impacts of opioids on communities. The reason this is coming to you is that in order to participate, you have to agree to join this settlement by filling out the forms that you see attached in your packet, one for each. So I have taken the step of electronically signing up to be able to sign these, but on the advice of town council, he recommends that you all approve my actually doing that. So this only puts us in the queue to be able to participate in the settlement. The more communities that participate, the
Smaller.
The smaller the pie.
yes, but you don't participate, you don't get anything. So
That's a 0, right, exactly.
0 is still 0. So
Getting a
it's
little nervous
recommended
with
that
it.
we do. I can't begin to tell you. I don't know how exactly we'd use it. It just has to be used to kind of address the impacts of it. So we'll have to learn more about it, and this would come back to you also to actually approve the final settlement when we do know the number. So this is just, Blythe, yes, you can hit yes on the DocuSign and, and go forward. The State Attorney General's office has been in close contact to make sure, I think to all communities, looking for everyone to approve them, and they'd like that paperwork filed as soon as possible, even though it doesn't have to be done by law until January, so.
So am I assume, but I'm trying not to do that. Is my understanding correct? I'll get there. That the reason that we are being asked to participate, as opposed to just, yeah, of course you're going to participate, is because of the general rules regarding class actions. That if somebody participates in a class action, they cannot sue individually.
Exactly.
And why that would matter, people think, well, why would that matter? Because if you get enough people in a class, the lawyers get lots of money. Not any problem with that. I have no problem with that. But the rest of the class may each get $1.79. You may have noticed it with credit cards, right? 76 cents. And so to the extent that people may say, hey, I didn't want to be in that class, and there's all that litigation, that's this, right? So, but it is, I don't see a world in which we're in a position to sue ourselves. So Blythe absolutely nailed it by saying we sign this or we get zero, unless somebody knows somebody who wants to sue as an individual. But then they would be suing as an individual, and it would just be the town that's not getting any money. So, so yeah, that was it. I just wanted to make sure that that was the reason, that it was just the typical class action reasons. Yep. Anita, any questions?
No questions?
I can think of lots of things. I'm sure you can too, if we ever got some
Yes.
money. Kevin,
good.
any
We
questions?
could put it toward a new fire station.
Well, because they,
They could have training in that conference
Yes.
room.
Yep. All right, no questions?
None.
All right, well then I guess we need a motion, right?
I move that the board vote to authorize the town administrator to execute documents to enable the town to participate in 2 settlements regarding opioid litigation.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Number 5.
So as you know, at the last meeting, the board approved all the other license that were up and asked a question about was there any conversation with any of the all alcohol license holders, and there's 5 of them, and the list is in your packet, as to whether they needed or wanted or appreciate some type of consideration for the full, going from charging nothing for those licenses last year to what we would typically charge. So we followed up on that. Judith sent out a lovely letter to all 5 of them and asked them to let us know if they had some reason why they'd like the board to consider. We heard back from one of them. That letter's in your packet. And so I leave it to you to decide whether you want to make an adjustment in that particular one or take some other action regarding that one or any of them. We did not hear from the other 4.
And can you remind me, the fees, I know they were listed in the first one, is it $1,000?
So the restaurant all alcohol is $1,950, and just for the on-premise wine and malt, it's $800. And the one that's requested,
Oh, it's right in her letter.
would be not $1,950.
So, my opinion, for whatever it's worth, is that we made this, we were happy to do it before because we're mindful of the impacts that we can see and the ones that we can't of the pandemic. But I also like income for the town. I'm a big fan. But that it was right to put it out there again, and that one person, it was important enough for them to respond back. I'm not denigrating anyone else, but it's entirely possible that they're so busy with other things that this wasn't. And so it would be my opinion that we approve everybody's licenses, but that we waive or reduce whatever it is that
I think we waived it last year.
Yep. That's right. And I don't know if you've read the letter, I remembered learning this too. But that we waive it for this one, and that we just, that would be my opinion. That's just me. I'm just one guy. Kevin?
Yeah, from my perspective, the residual impacts of the pandemic are very much still an impact for restaurants right now. So I would be in support of waiving the fees for the next year as well,
For all of them or just the one?
for all of them.
And they had a week?
A little longer than a week. We asked them to get back to us by last Thursday. She jumped right on it the next morning.
And we still to date haven't heard from any of them?
No, we.
December
course.
8th, so it was a day after the
Right,
last.
so it's almost 2 weeks.
almost, yeah.
But she still had, there was no responses as of yesterday.
Right, no, that's
From
what I was just
other-
saying, it's more than a week. It's not
Yeah.
like we just asked them yesterday.
Right. So I guess in the, in my heart, I just want to waive it for everybody. That's what I'd like to do, but I think in my rational part of my brain, we waive it for Silas because she's asked us. We gave them an opportunity. They didn't come up with the opportunity, and we need to build a fire station. So.
Well, we have things to spend it on.
We have things to spend it on, and so as much as if they had indicated any kind of hardship, I'm all in, but they haven't, and we asked, and so I feel like Scylla's we waive, and the others we,
That's typically
keep
how
it.
we handle hardships. We have a somewhat similar process for someone who gets a bill for ambulance services. If they have that, they can approach for some type of fee reduction or complete waiver, depending on the situation. Doesn't happen much, but it does happen occasionally.
And if we do it this way, which is to sort of track how we usually do it for people who are asking, and somebody comes forward in January and says, for the following series of unfortunate events, I didn't open my email, I didn't see it, I didn't know, can we revisit?
I would say no, because in order to be able to open on January 1st and move forward, they have to have paid their fees and actually picked up the license that you've signed. So we really can't wait until the new year to sort it out, and this is your last meeting of the year.
And these were the emails that they have on file with their license application? Okay, so then
Because
makes me feel a
there's
little-
lots of follow-up that happens during the licensing process, make sure inspections are done, and they come in and actually have to sign for the license before you even take it up in the beginning of December. There's many steps to the process.
Okay, all right, then I feel better. So my comfort would be to do it how I suggested it. I don't know, do you want to do a motion where we do?
Well, no, because if you make the motion to just approve Scylla's, then that falls under what I was going to vote for
Yes,
anyway.
that's right, yeah. I started to get sort of wound up like I was moderator again. Do I have to do a motion inside a motion?
Options that you do. Okay. Okay.
So we're going to move to waive the fees for Scylla's
Yes.
for the year, and then the others are just, we already took
signed
care of.
them, they're already ready.
Okay, does that feel?
That feels right. It doesn't feel super awesome, like you like to be able to just, but yeah, we have to draw a line somewhere.
And I think, I feel good that we made we reached out, which I think is above and beyond. So we reached out and said, we're thinking about you and we're here for you if you need us, and they didn't reach back. So that, I think that's the consequence.
Have these restaurants ever communicated with the town via email before? They have.
Yeah, this is,
The
they're,
same.
during the
That's what I-
process, because a lot happens before.
Well, no, you asked if these are the emails on file,
then
not
they-
if they have had back and forth
then she said
communication.
that
We
they
have.
were, that's how
There
they were
has been.
communicating
Oh, yeah.
with them. Because otherwise, just because you put it in the application, you're right, like, it gets changed and you don't get anything, but they were emailing with this one.
Yeah, okay.
Because that would have been my concern as well, like it goes.
And they're long-established businesses, thankfully, so they know that they've got to come get that license by the end of the year and pay for it. And I've had the inspections by police and by fire and building department, so.
So I guess I'm inclined to just waive it for Silas and have the other ones stay the way they are, because we haven't heard from them.
And I would agree with that. And I'm not saying it because, oh, you didn't respond to us. I'm assuming that because it was couched as if you still have a need, and they filled out their application without asking for it, and then when that was presented to them as an option, they didn't indicate that they needed it. And,
Yep.
And the one person who did, it's not just the pandemic. So,
General hardship, yep.
it's a
Yep.
right.
Yep.
I mean, I'm not knocking the pandemic, but I'm just saying that maybe that's the thing that distinguished it in terms of why that's the only one we heard. But, yeah, I am inclined, again, just mindful of the other stuff that we are probably going to have to be spending money on, that I'm still open to people who come with a hardship, but I would like to
I agree.
start establishing the bright line again
I agree.
until Omicron messes everything up again.
Shall I?
Sure.
I'll try. I move that the board vote to waive the fee for Silas Coffee House for calendar year 2022.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Was that it? Like, we voted on the whole thing last
Also.
time? All right. So next is town administrator updates, I guess.
A few things. Have had several, 5 or 6 emails from residents very thrilled with the holiday lights. They're just beautiful.
Me too.
I was thinking, Judith and I were thinking that one of the light pictures that is of the gazebo lit up might be a wonderful time report cover. I don't know if anybody likes or hates that idea. I'll just put it out there.
Yeah, it's lovely.
Yeah. So just want to give a shout out to both Ann Proto and the RecCom and DPW. It's a collective effort that has a wonderful result, and just
It's
wanting to know
stunning.
people have reached out to say thanks, so that's great news. I think we've tried to put it out there lots of different ways, but for those who use the transfer station, the next 2 Fridays are your day, and we're not open on Saturday and Christmas or on New Year's. It's in signs, it's at the transfer station, it's on the community page. You heard it here first or second or last. Just hopefully we don't have anyone hoping to get in to drop something off on the holidays, because we will be closed. We will be having a public hearing, the board needs to, in the second meeting in January for Camger coatings. They need a flammables permit for their new building. We've got that all ready to go, to be advertised, we just want you to know it's coming. And then COVID, certainly the cases are up. We just got the latest overview from Tom Gilbert, who still does those for the Board of Health. We're up to 1,279 cases as of last Thursday. Our 14-day average is 28 cases a day. It's up, but it's actually, we're lower than most of our surrounding communities, and the county is lower than the state, if that gives anyone any comfort. But as you probably saw this morning, the governor came out with a suggestion of an advisory for an indoor mask mandate, and given that we've had some cases in our employee community, we're going to take a much stronger approach. Tomorrow, we are going to start with an indoor mask mandate for all employees, whether you're vaccinated or not. If you're away from your desk, you can't distance. If you're coming in, whether you're vaccinated or not, what we don't want to do is get to the point where we're trying to debate with people whether they're vaccinated, whether or not. Everybody, me, Amanda, all of us. So I did run that by the Board of Health chair today. They are having a meeting next week, but she's in support of that. So signage will be changing in the morning, and we're not sure how long we'll do this. We'll do it just because the latest variant is so transmissible. We just want to be a little more careful. And we are monitoring the rules that the federal government was trying to put in place, but have been meeting with some resistance at the court level. I should point out that those requirements, you be vaccinated for if you're an employer of more than 100, are OSHA employers. We are not subject to OSHA in Massachusetts. We fall under the state's Department of Labor. We would assume if it gets to that point, they would adopt the same thing, and then we will be talking about employees who are not vaccinated requiring that to happen. We're just not there yet. So this is our interim step to be safer and, like I said, take off the table debating with people their vaccination status. So just want you to know what we're doing about that.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
In terms of this meeting and like I brought my mask tonight because I'm in a mask all day long and just like, do you wear it? Do you not wear it? And so because at one point we were all remote, right? Because it got bad. And so where is the deciding line about this meeting in terms of, do we meet in person with masks on? Do we, because I'm suspecting that it's going to get worse before it gets better, right? So the next 6 to 8 weeks could be tricky, and so I'm wondering how and when we decide about this meeting, the format for this group.
Well, it's certainly up to you. I mean, my suggestion would be that we all do what we started to do when we came back into the room, which was wearing our masks, sitting near each other. Anyone in the audience is going to have their masks on, and if that's not comfortable or things have changed some more, we can talk about going back to remote. It's really up to you.
Yeah, I know I work in Boston, and Boston moved in the direction that you're talking about. It was like last summer, towards the end of the summer, which is why for every time I come home or come into town hall, I have the mask on, and I'm like, oh, okay, I can take it down. So for us, even though I'm vaccinated, got the booster today, which we've all heard me talk about like a lot now. I'm going to still talk about it. If I get symptoms tomorrow, you're going to hear about it. If I'm in my office, no mask. I get up to go to the kitchen or go to the bathroom or go talk to my administrative assistant, I have a mask. Now, she's in a cubicle without a mask, but if she gets up, even though it's the best that you can do, right? You can't force somebody who, like, I can't be like, haha, I'm sitting in my office without a mask and you're in your cubicle with one. And it seems to work, but when people come into my office, if I know that they're vaccinated, if they're not vaccinated, they leave their mask on. And I know that you're not supposed to know, but we have a rule that if you're not vaccinated, you never get to take your mask down, whether you're in your cubicle, whether you're in your office, it's all masked all the time. And so I would not invite someone without a vaccine to remove their mask. But we have removed our masks. But now with this whole, the vaccinations don't work, you now need a booster, and you don't know who's got a booster and who. I'm thinking that just probably better to leave it to, because I agree with, I understand what Blythe's saying. It's hard to challenge people. It's hard to, and then you learn that you've been relying on somebody to manage your health, and they're not doing a good job at that. But it's even harder, I think, even if you know someone's like, oh, did they get the booster? When did they get the booster? Is the booster effective? It just seems like it's probably safer. It's just very hard to speak.
So we wanted to inform you first before we implemented it, so that's what we're doing tonight. Said the Board of Health will meet Tuesday. Whether Eileen the board want to talk about what they do for other, suggest to other businesses in town, I think they will discuss, but she's comfortable with where we're headed now.
Because we can always, I know it's not on the thing, we can always sort of talk about it in terms of, my recollection is before we went back to completely without masks, there was sort of that interim where we were really far apart. And so maybe it's really far apart with a mask, but if you're trying to talk, you can take the mask down. Because it's just for those of us, and I got my little asthma card, I could be like, haha, but I'm not going to try to infect someone else. It's just sometimes it's hard to speak, so creating some sort of a hybrid, at least while you're talking. But if you have to talk through a mask, I guess I'll just shout.
So,
All right.
that's it.
So now on to the warrants. Who wants to do those?
I've lost track, Kevin. Is it me? I move that the board approve 4 warrants for the period December 7th, 2021 through December 17th, 2021, as printed on the agenda for this meeting.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Did you beat me out of the gate with that? You started all those in favor before I said second?
No.
I didn't realize it was a race now.
No, I didn't. He said second.
I'm gonna be ready next time.
He seconded it before I said anything.
We have a video to go back
Go to the video.
So last one
You
is,
just don't even realize you're seconding, because I think what it is, like you second in your sleep. Second!
should I make a motion for minutes? I move that the board approve the meeting minutes of December 7th, 2021.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
We have a final motion.
I move that the board adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Really, really, do you have anything you need us to sign?
Yes.
Okay, I'll just go to the restroom.